All right, hey everyone, it's day 4 of GDC, and I'm sitting down with my old coworker, Lindsay Peck. We worked together in QA at ArenaNet on Guild Wars 2. Since then, she's moved on to a large number of projects, and this is actually our first time connecting since ArenaNet.
Oh
Really,
my God, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so it's been almost 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good check-in time.
Right?
We get to see a whole spectrum.
Right, and so, I mean, let's start with like how you got started, an introduction of yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Lindsay Peck, and currently I'm over at Riot Games. I'm a QA training lead, and basically that's a kind of weird area that the industry is just starting to get into, as I'm learning at GDC actually.
Really?
We're sort of starting to focus on learning and development for our people in the industry. So we have a lot of discussion around educational games and educational apps, but we're just sort of starting to look at like what does learning and development look like from an internal perspective.
Right.
And so Riot actually has a central L&D team that helps the whole company level up and feel like they're growing. And there are a few sort of smaller teams that strike out into disciplines. And so I am a QA L&D person essentially. So I'm developing some curriculum and just learning opportunities for people in QA specifically.
This sounds almost exactly like what you were doing at ArenaNet.
Exactly.
So if you don't know what a BVT is, get ready because you're going to learn real quick, especially if you're going into QA and starting at a company that has no automation.
Yeah, exactly. So that feeds really well into where I started. So that's where I'm currently at. And then where I started, as you already know, Joe, my first job in the industry was actually at ArenaNet, working a month before Guild Wars 2 launched, I think. That's when I started.
Really?
So I got out of college, and then a month later, I started at ArenaNet. I moved from Portland to Seattle.
Nice.
And I was like, oh my God, I played Guild Wars 1 in high school. I'm like freaking out. Like, how do you go from not knowing if you'll be in the industry at all to being at a company that you actually played their games when you were a little bit younger?
Yeah.
Right? So I was like, I can't believe I'm in this scenario. I never thought I would actually join the QA discipline because of what I had heard about QA in the game industry specifically. Not because the profession seemed lame or boring, but because I had heard how poorly QA people were treated.
Yeah.
And so I was only convinced by Paul Bells actually at that GDC, at the previous GDC. I met him and we talked about industry stuff. I was just graduating, and he was telling me about QA at ArenaNet, and I'm like, well, I love ArenaNet, but QA, I don't know, man, what's the deal? And he was like, well, QA works a little bit differently here. Like, we talk to the developers, we sit in the same area as everybody. We can go and talk to them in person or Messenger or any of these options. And so I was like, well, that seems really interesting. I still don't know very much about the QA profession, but I decided to jump in. And I knew because I had just graduated with a degree in computer science and art that I didn't want to do either of those things, which is super weird. I had just finished a senior project where I was the lead designer and the lead artist, and I didn't really do much of the programming, but I got to see all the programming that happened from our lead programmer. And I was just like, man, I don't know if I want to do these parts of the game industry.
Yeah.
But I knew that I was still interested in the game industry. So QA seemed like a good fit for me at the time, even though I wasn't really sure what it was.
Right.
So I made it through the ArenaNet QA interview, which was super scary because I had to draw a dungeon on the whiteboard. Whiteboard testing for QA is not a thing that I have experienced anywhere else.
I've never heard of it anywhere else.
Still like one of my favorite interview processes. So went through that and started in QA a month before launch, which is a great way to be introduced to the industry, like jumping into crunch. And actually immediately after college, it was a great time because like all my friends were at ArenaNet that I was making. Everybody I knew was there. And my family was in Portland, so I didn't have a lot of obligations. So I was able to just dive deep into the industry and like learn about QA and figure out what the deal was. So I started there. I was a basic contract tester. After 6 months, I was moved on to the prototype team, and I built up the QA process for that small team at ArenaNet. And unfortunately, we never got to release our product, like most people in the industry, really. But it was still a really great experience because I was basically alone, and I just had my lead at the time to sort of tell me, like, here are your objectives, here's kind of what the director's looking for, try to do these things. And we were both just working together to try to figure out how do we support this team in the best way possible. And that's really where I learned really great communication skills with team members and what it's like to be an embedded QA person, which was fairly new at the time. Like people were just starting to do embedded stuff. ArenaNet had just switched to that after we went live with GW2.
Yep.
So it was fairly new, not only for ArenaNet, but for the industry, like having these QA people around all the time.
Yep.
And that was a really cool way for me to learn about that process. I also got to learn about agile development and working with a team in agile. So I really got like a good jump start on a few different ways to work with developers. And then from there, my contract ended and I had to take a contract break.
Boo.
So what did I do? Of course, I worked, because it lined up with summertime, I worked at a technology camp for kids.
That's right. I remember that.
And of course, this leads into my now professional career, which is great. I taught middle schoolers game design ideas and elements and like just a basic foundational knowledge of like what is game design, what makes something fun. I taught all of that through Minecraft and making adventure maps.
Awesome.
So I got to work with 8 middle schoolers every week. It was just a 1-week class for the whole summer, and we went from either, you know, they had just only played Minecraft, they had never really experimented with designing anything, to them making their own adventure maps, which is a really fun progression to see in just 5 days.
Right.
So that was a really interesting process because I had never taught before. I had never taught kids before, but I knew I liked working with kids and I loved games, and I'm like, why don't I give this a shot? It fits into my time slot perfectly for my contract. And I already knew ArenaNet was actually going to bring me back full time at that point.
Right.
And I actually even signed something before I left, and I'm like, I want to sign something so I know I'm coming back.
That's
so
awesome.
I like hopped on that pretty quickly, and then I got to teach these kids for a while, and I found out that it was one of the hardest things ever. I like completely broke down my first week, and I'm like, I need to quit. This is the worst. And I actually went to my director of our camp, and I was like, listen, there's some of the kids in this particular group are really hard to work with. I've never worked with kids before. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm really worried their parents are going to be really mad by the end of this week if they don't have something to show. And she knew my experience, which was minimal, and she knew where I was at. And she said the best thing ever. She said, Lindsay, I put some kids that I knew were going to be a little bit more high energy on your group because I knew you'd be able to handle it, and I know you can do it. And she told me to it was this beautiful piece of advice because she didn't tell me to do anything specific, but she told me literally to kind of just do it, but she gave me the confidence by saying, like, I put them on your team for a specific reason because you can do it. And I was like, oh my God.
That's one of the best senses of being a manager that I've heard in a long time, because it's that balance between distress and eustress. Eustress, it's going to push you a little bit beyond your comfort and a little bit beyond maybe even your capabilities, but then you grow into it. Distress is where you're just completely overwhelmed, you've shut down, you can't learn, you can't do anything, and you certainly can't model any proper behaviors.
Right.
So that just that little nudge is such a powerful piece.
Yeah, and when I talked to her about it, it was great because that was just maybe like 1 or 2 days into the week. Because like I said, it's just 5 days with these kids, but it feels like a lifetime because you're there all day. You're there from like 8:30 a.m. until 6 o'clock at night.
Oh, man.
And you need to like take them to lunch, and they go outside, and but you also have to squeeze in teaching them. And there's a whole presentation at the end of the week where their parents show up, and their parents might complain if you like don't have. It's all this beautiful mess.
Yep.
So I took what she said, and I was like, wow, her having confidence in me as the director of the whole camp makes me feel like I should just tough it out. I'm not quitting. So I toughed it out for the rest of the week. And then for the rest of the summer, it was not the easiest thing ever, but it definitely became my job. I knew I was developing the curriculum every week and making it better. I ended up making a schedule with like objectives and activities throughout the whole week that the whole camp ended up using for all of the Minecraft classes.
That's awesome.
Which was really cool. And so I ended up going from like, I'm literally quitting, I'm the worst person on the planet, to people using my curriculum and my practices and activities, which was like really great transition to go through, but I had to go through a whole bunch of bullshit. Unfortunately.
I mean, that's not too dissimilar than QA being kind of tacked on after a feature is being developed and saying, we need to test this, and then you need to collect all the documentation and get everyone else up to speed.
Yeah.
So, but the proper path is QA is involved at the very beginning.
Right.
You come up with the plan together.
Right.
And so, like, having a summer camp like that where you're just wham, bam, and you're in it, like, that's not ideal, but I mean, at some point, sometimes you just have to deal with it. And it's going to cross whether you're making video games, whether you're teaching, whether you're just doing art therapy for yourself. It's going to come into that growth over time just by the fact that you're doing it.
Yeah, and when you think about it as well, we were essentially doing 1 week sprints at these camps, right?
Yeah.
We'd have one project. We just get these little tiny humans to make a thing or learn a thing in the span of 5 days and show. We literally had a sprint review where their parents show up and they're all like the product owners, right?
Yeah.
So that was a really great experience in rapid iteration and making our curriculum a lot better for a bunch of middle schoolers. So that was pretty cool. So I went back to Arena after that full time, and that's where I started doing what you were just talking about, which is I was sort of the training and process improvement person, where like a portion of my job ended up being developing an onboarding program for anyone new who was coming on, because we were getting a lot of beta testers at the time, and all of them needed to understand basically every large facet of Guild Wars 2 in order to run these build verification tests, because we didn't have automation.
And we were doing like 6 a week?
I think so.
Yeah.
So people needed to get up to speed quite quickly. So I developed a whole program where it wasn't just a bunch of PowerPoints, it was a bunch of PowerPoints plus, where you would have PowerPoints and homework and things to do, and I'd actually kind of be that person's lead or mentor for the couple of weeks that they'd be going through training with me, and then we'd sort of unleash them on the actual BDT to write actual bugs and work with their actual team.
Right.
And that was a pretty cool experience as well, and I loved doing it. So after about a little over a year doing that, I moved over to Motiga and worked on Gigantic. And I actually moved from being a more administrative process level person back to a feet on the ground analyst. So I was doing analyst work over at Motiga, and that was a really interesting learning experience. And there was a lot of stuff that I went through in my personal life at the time. So it was one of those like dark moments where you learn a lot, but in the moment you're like, this is the worst ever. Yeah. And so unfortunately, Motiga had to lay off a bunch of people in February of 2016, I think it was, and at that time I had already actually been talking to PopCap Games to potentially work with them, because they actually were within walking distance to my apartment in downtown Seattle. And I was like, I love Plants vs. Zombies. If I could end up on a PvZ team at all, I'd be super hyped. But I was definitely in the process of going through that. So in the meantime, I went to GDC that year. I got to do a whole bunch of Twitch streaming stuff, which was like my side hobby for a long time, was doing a lot of Twitch streaming. Still definitely a side thing of mine. And then I ended up being a senior analyst at PopCap, which was really awesome, because I got to work with the PvZ team. I ended up on a PvZ2 team, which was super great. I was like, my ideal scenario is PvZ1 or PvZ2, and I got PvZ2, so I was really excited.
Cool.
I loved working on that game for a while. The work ended up being a little bit different than I had hoped. I wanted to start moving into more of a leadership position in QA or into a production position. So I was looking at both of those avenues at that point in my career. I was like, I want to be in QA, but as a leader, I want to be in production, helping teams get their work done. So I was sort of at a middle ground at PopCap, where I was kind of doing the leadery stuff, which really was me kind of doing like certification verification and submitting certification to Apple, and that's not super fun and engaging. But I also got to help our team learn about agile development and getting QA involved in the process earlier, which was really fun. That team was brand new to it; they were super open to it, and teaching people agile is something I really like. Well, teaching people in general is something I really like, obviously. I actually ended up doing a little bit of training for them as well, because that kind of became my thing after ArenaNet. Was like, oh, you've done training for QA? That nobody does that, so why don't you do it?
Did you know Matthew Moore started the same way?
Did he really?
Yeah, we were on Halo Wars together at Microsoft, and after Halo Wars wrapped up, I went off to the pre-certification team within the reserves, and Matthew actually went to the training team, so he was the one making all the presentations and videos for onboarding new testers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he started that, and then he was doing all the technical writing. He was writing the scripts for it.
Yeah.
And then I poached him and brought him over to ArenaNet.
Oh, my God, that's awesome. I didn't know he did that. Good on you, Matthew Moore.
Right?
I love it.
He's here, though. Have you met
GDC?
Yeah.
I haven't seen him at GDC.
Yeah, he's around.
Damn it.
He's free, like, all day tomorrow. You should hit him up.
Okay, I'll wait it. So I did a bunch of training stuff at ArenaNet, or I already skipped that, didn't I? Sorry.
Yep.
We're at PopCap now.
Yep.
Wow, my brain. It's definitely like near the end of GDC, right?
Yep.
So, it's almost over, and my brain can melt tomorrow evening. So at PopCap, think I really liked the team. I liked the people. I liked the company a lot. It was a really great scenario, but it wasn't the type of work I wanted to do. And I was pretty open with them about wanting to move into more leadership stuff. I really wanted to I want to be a leader, or I want to work with people. That's the production side of things. So how do I do that? And it didn't seem like a lot of avenues were super open at the time. And I actually ended up with an opportunity to work with my now fiance on his indie game, which is Star Mazer and Star Mazer DSP for Amigo Software. So he was like, hey, we need a producer. We don't have one. You wanted to try doing production. You're kind of at a weird stagnant point with this company that you do like, but it's a little weird. And so I was like, well, why don't I just try it? And so I left a studio job in order to do indie game stuff for a little over a year. So that's how long I ended up doing production there. And something I learned with doing production for an indie team was that it's definitely not my style, I don't think, in terms of I like working with people, and I think where I feel the most rewarded in my work is when I can help people in person break through a problem.
Right.
I think usually it's about that being in person part. Yeah. So being remote with everybody on an indie team was a little bit harder for me.
Okay.
We also went through a bit of a rough year with some really strange legal stuff that happened our former composer kind of had a bit of a breakdown, and they actually tried to claim that we had stolen their music and that we hadn't paid them their full amount. And there's this whole thing about it. I don't want to get into it right now, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was a really Don and I actually converted from being game developers to being trying to figure out this whole legal scenario. We ended up getting help from a lawyer on YouTube, Leonard French, and he's actually a really good friend of ours now. He's just been helping us get through the whole scenario. We finished the whole. We ended up going into a lawsuit scenario where we sued this former composer, and we're like, listen, we own the rights to the music. We don't owe you any money. Stop trying to DMCA people that have recorded gameplay of our game, because this person started DMCA any gameplay. And so that was a really, really weird scenario. So all game development had to pause. So for a majority of that year, I actually was working with Don to be a bit reactive and trying to deal with this lawsuit situation, to deal with stagnation in game development, and working with trying to find a new publisher. So those were all again, really hard times, but a lot of learning and skill building, and really one of the hardest years of my life and Don's life as well, just separately. And us pushing through that, not only together as a couple, but a team, was a really great learning scenario. And I don't know that I'd want either of us to go through any of that ever again, but we came out at the end of it, and basically at the beginning of 2018 was when everything kind of started slowing down in terms of craziness, and we both feel so much better coming out of it. And there's a lot of great stuff that's happened with Star Mazer for him at GDC just this year. And then I actually, at the end of the year, ended up getting a job with Riot Games, where I'm now doing the training lead stuff. And I had been talking to Riot off and on since 2014, I think it was, and they've always been in my life and out of my life, and it's never been the right time either for me to apply or for me to think about moving because we relocated to LA, and I had lived in the Pacific Northwest my whole life. And so there's this whole interesting back and forth with them where they'd kind of hey, why don't you apply? And I'd be like, I'm not ready yet, or I don't feel like I know League of Legends well enough. Why would they hire me? But the company Riot has always their company culture and their manifesto and their goals as a company has always really intrigued me. So that's why they kept coming back in my life, where I'd be like, hey guys, what's up? But then I'd be like, I know I don't play League of Legends enough, but you're really cool. And so they ended up having this gap where they felt they needed to fill with a training lead or a training manager. And so we started talking back and forth, and over the course of 6 months, we got to a point where all right, I'm going in for an on-site interview, talking to everybody, and then I got the job and we moved to LA.
Now, what was that like? I mean, an extended interview session, basically, like that, for 6 months. I mean, did they actually have a formal position for a
they
train?
Didn't, actually.
It sounds like they were trying to feel it out. And
my first phone call actually was with my now manager, and I can't remember exactly what we said, but the conversation felt like it could have been a phone interview at the time, because someone reached out to me on the QA SIG Slack, and he was like, are you still doing training stuff? And I was like, well, no, not really, but I really like it. And then all of a sudden he was like, okay, I'm having a manager call you. And I'm like, I don't know what this means. Am I applying for a job?
Is this a consultation thing? Can I get paid for this?
Right. And I was talking to Don about it, and I'm like, I'm like, listen, Riot Games is going to call me, and when Riot Games calls you, you pick up the damn phone. And so I was like, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to talk to them. I don't know what they want, but Don and I both agreed that let's see how far this situation goes or what happens. So I ended up talking to my now manager, and at the end of the first phone call, he was like, I think I'm going to go talk to our director, and we're going to figure out a job description. So that's where we were, basically. They were like, we know we want someone to work on training. Yeah. We don't know how to find that. They didn't know how to find that person. Like, how do you look for someone who has training experience for QA? Who has QA experience, who has training,
and who wants to do training and not QA.
Exactly. Yeah. Like someone who would fit that realm is a little bit weird, right? How do you recruit for that?
Yeah.
So someone at Riot had already known me because we met at PAX forever ago, and he knew I had done training at ArenaNet. And so he was like, guys, reach out to this person. She's done training. He liked talking to me at the Riot Mixer I went to at that one PAX where we met. And so he was like, just reach out to this person and let's see what happens. And so I ended up having a couple of kind of phone conversations with my manager. I had a phone interview with the person who was currently working on onboarding. He was like me at ArenaNet. He was like fixing the onboarding scenario, and he was basically where I was when I was doing ArenaNet stuff. Yeah. And then I also had a phone interview with an L&D person who was kind of separate from QA, but she understood what was needed. And then there was a bit just a lot of email back and forth and some phone calls, and then okay, let's get you into an on-site interview. And then after the on-site interview, there's another phone interview with a senior leadership person.
At least they're doing their due diligence.
They are. If anyone can say anything about Riot's application process, it's definitely due diligence, and I super respect that. And so it's something I really admire. So the whole 6-month thing for me was fine because I wasn't looking for a job at the time. Yeah. So I wasn't I wasn't in between jobs. Yeah. Don and I were fine. We were getting through the lawsuit and stuff, and it was almost over. So we were in a good place, and I'm like, let's just see how far this goes, even if it takes a while. And then they ended up hiring me 6 months later. I know it can be difficult for other people in that scenario. If you're in between jobs, a 6 month interview process can be a little bit difficult, right? But for me, I lucked out in that scenario, and they were like, come on down to LA. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I get to jump into a role that isn't super defined. I get goals from my managers. Yeah. Leadership knows what they want. I know that I'm going to try to meet those goals, but it's sort of in a whatever way we can figure out that works situation.
And, that's kind of the best situation to be in, is to be hired and told solve this problem, as opposed to solve this problem this way and just do it.
Right.
Because then there's no fun in that. Yeah. I don't think there's any fun or creativity in that. Yeah. But then also it's just you're constantly going to be badgered along the way of why isn't this perfect? But if no one knows exactly how to do it, but they know what they want-ish, by the end, you have full spectrum to just go hard into whatever it is and really make it your own. And it's I think that's really important for people to be happy, especially in software development or the systems around software development, so that they know that they're allowed that flexibility of creativity and it can show a little bit of that personal flair.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I had an interesting conversation with Don yesterday about this when we were having dinner, where I was like, listen, I think I definitely I'm solid in the QA area. I love QA as a profession. I've been an evangelist for QA since I started. It fits my brain and how it works. Yeah. I don't want to do QA analyst work anymore, even though I like it and respect the work a whole bunch. Yep. But I want to be a leader in this area, or an evangelist for this profession. And being a training leader is a great place to do that. I get to help people learn when they get here. I can help people grow their skills, and hopefully add value to the department over time, so that everybody can feel like they're learning and growing and contributing to a cool profession.
Yeah, and now that you're not doing that QA analyst stuff, how much do you still use those skills that you got in QA?
All the time.
Right?
This is something I love about QA, is that I went to school for programming and art. I researched the game industry on my own. I didn't really learn much about QA specifically, and it is good to have like core QA skills and understanding of like what is a test case or a test suite, how do we do risk assessment. All of those skills are really, really great, but like QA has a certain mindset that works with it. It's somebody who likes to investigate things and solve puzzles, and someone who can also communicate super well. It's this interesting meld of multiple types of skills. So it's something that I really like as a profession. And then the better I get at being a QA analyst or being a QA professional, the better I am at communicating with people in my real life, right? Like I'm really good at asking more questions all the time and being investigative, and I'm really good at solving problems with other humans because I've had to do that as my job. So it's I love that profession. It's just, it feels like it brings together so many different skill sets that are invaluable.
And much like how a tech artist is kind of in between engineering and art, they kind of facilitate between the two.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about QA across all the departments.
Yeah.
Because QA has to have their hands in practically everything.
Yeah.
Outside of like maybe legal and stuff like that.
Right.
But you have a QA person then has to start learning how to talk audio to an audio person, but then able to translate that to that VFX artist on the other side saying, when they're going to do this, they're going to hook it up this way. Do you have something else to latch onto that hook and work? You start learning technical skills. You start learning art talk. You start learning the personalities that you deal with, and you start balancing what they need. And so communication style is something that I learned from my time in QA, and then what it took to balance out from what my bosses wanted, but then also having to, as the customer, but then also having to basically say, no, you can't have that thing, Art.
Yeah.
That's way too crazy.
Yeah.
And there's no way QA can test that without these tools. And are you going to invest some of your clout in the company to say, we're going to do this thing, but QA needs this? Are you going to be an advocate for what QA actually needs? So it was my step from QA tester to QA lead and doing all of the management stuff. It really just opened me up to all the personalities and how you really have to understand what's important to those other people before you can really talk to them or really listen to them.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you had the same experience.
Yeah.
QA, I use QA every day, all day, whether I'm staring at the backlog of Jira and saying, what's most important here, and I can just run through the tests and the amount of work that all the other departments have to go through to get this one piece of backlog work done. And I mean, there's proper estimates and stuff like that, but that estimate or that item in the backlog doesn't necessarily reflect the situation that the studio is in at that time.
Right.
And so constantly grooming, constantly going, negotiating with myself, but then also negotiating with the stakeholders. It's all a QA approach. It's just a different interface.
Yeah, and it's like some of the most rewarding moments that I've felt have been either because of a QA skill or because of something I did as a QA professional. Like it feels really great to kind of know what all of the different disciplines are doing, especially if you have a brain that's just interested in so many things. Like the reason I got a degree in programming and art was not because I'm an overachiever. It's because I literally could not decide between programming or art because I liked both of them so much at the time. And so I flip-flopped back and forth for 4 years. And then in my 5th year of college, I found out I could get multiple degrees. And I'm like, well, I guess I've already done that. So why don't we just sign this up?
Just make that a thing.
I'll hit you right on the next game industry train. And so it like being in QA really, you get to see all of that happen. And I had so many moments in QA where I'd be talking to an engineer and I would say, oh, like, did you know about this thing that's happening over in art or this tech art thing or what, like different facets of the company? And it's so interesting to understand that you have way more of a view of what's happening in your pipeline than a lot of the disciplines, because the specific disciplines will be trying to get their work done, to get their code checked in, to finish a piece of art, to finish some design brainstorming, any sort of facet. Like their day-to-day job is very specific, and yours can actually be a bit more broad as QA, and you can see everything, and you can help people be informed of other disciplines, and then you can even know when two things coming together might be really scary, and you being the person to help your team through all of that stuff is really rewarding.
Yeah.
Super cool.
I told this story last night at dinner, but I'll record it this time. 6 months before Guild Wars 2 shipped, no tree in the game had collision.
Okay.
I had been hounding environment art and engineering, like, when is this going to happen for like 2 years?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, you're not going to be able to ship a AAA MMO fantasy immersive game where your trees have no collision.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. People
Right.
will pick on this the entire time. 6 months before launch, decide to buy Umbra, install it, and get it all running up through the build server, and whole plethora of bugs and everything comes out. Like 2 weeks later, we finally have it up and running. But like just pounding on that issue for 2 years and just being like, hey, you know, we're going to do this thing right.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, we're going to do this thing right. And eventually it turned on, and it was just that magic moment. But it took QA pushing that thing to make sure it didn't fall off.
Yeah.
And it was really rewarding to have that done.
Yeah.
But it was also being able to see that train wreck coming.
Right.
And saying, like, maybe it wouldn't have been that important. Maybe it wouldn't have tanked meta scores or anything like that. But, like, it's a layer of consistency for building that quality product.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's part of our job in the QA profession to defend players. And defend always sounds a little bit maybe even too aggressive, but like I always say that QA is advocating for the player.
Yep.
Like if anyone is going to advocate for how this game feels in a more objective way, it's going to be your QA department. And if you're an artist or a programmer or a designer, even if you're a product owner who's separate from the work that's actually being done, the more you are centered around the project, the harder it's going to be for you to look at it from an objective view. And QA if you have good QA professionals who can communicate well, who can find issues, and who can be really good advocates for the player, that can be a game changer for you.
Exactly. And one of the panels I went to earlier this week was from, I believe he was the executive producer on Ubisoft's Ghost Recon Wildlands, their big 4-player co-op open world game. And one specific part of his presentation was, we use QA for perception and basic UX testing because they know the game better than anyone, and they will know the game better than anyone until after launch.
Yeah.
And so playtesting is nice, and you can get a whole bunch of people in on that and try different things, but QA is staring at that game 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day during crunch for the entire duration of the game.
Yeah.
They know what iteration was better as at least from the perspective as a potential player.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's still that grain of salt that you have to take with it because QA also can get a little too close or a little too passionate
especially
about stuff.
being embedded as well. Like, you can feel like you're super in it, and you might be staring at everything so early that you might get too attached to stuff.
Yeah.
So you still have a level of separation, but you have to be a bit more self-aware when you're embedded QA for sure.
Yeah, so I was super excited to hear someone from a project that had 3,000 people working on it across 7 different studios across multiple countries.
Wow.
Yeah, insane. I would love to dive into that backlog and see what that looked like.
Right.
But now, here's my dream. Every start a studio at Riot, whatever.
Right.
Every new hire goes through a week or 2 week QA boot camp.
Yeah.
Just so that
we did that at Arena.
I think I left just before that really started.
Yeah, we had, and it wasn't for a huge number of people, but whenever we got a new producer or a new designer, they went through my training for QA, which was a really interesting thing.
Sharon was your guinea pig, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, wait, no.
No.
It was Sharon. Amy Swank was also my...
Okay, yeah.
She was a production intern.
Yeah.
She said the best thing to me ever. I don't know if she still feels this way, but I'm holding it in my heart for the rest of my life. I talked to her, like, several months after she had been through my QA onboarding. She wasn't sitting with me anymore. She came into ArenaNet being a gamer, but not having worked in games before.
Okay.
So she didn't know the pipeline or like how QA worked. And her first experience in the game industry was QA training. And she said to me several months later that she still used what I taught her in production, and when we would do company playtests, she would be able to identify bugs, and she'd be able to articulate what she found and how she got there. And that was all because of being in a QA kind of boot camp for a couple of weeks before she moved into her production role. And that was a really cool thing to hear, that like learning QA stuff could have been so beneficial to someone in a completely different role.
And I mean, whether or not other people have voiced it, I can't tell you the number of people who have gone from QA to being an engineer, to being a designer, to being an artist, to being a producer, to moving anywhere in the industry in any discipline but they all started in QA. So if anyone's going to poo-poo QA, you're just kind of being a little bit of an elitist. Like, I was a designer from the beginning. Like, who cares?
So you don't know how to test your own stuff is what I'm hearing. You don't know how to properly test your own things.
Yeah, exactly. Or just like, I mean, if at this point, QA has come so far in, I think, the 5 years since I was at ArenaNet, and like the 4 years since I was there, and then the 5 years while I was there. And thankfully, what we saw in QA during Guild Wars 2 is something that I'm seeing replicated more and more in smaller studios and bigger studios. And I mean, the people so far I've interviewed for the podcast, I mean, my brother, he started in QA. Now he's a estet at Bungie.
Nice.
Evan Teixeira. So QA fanboy to QA to community relations manager. Who else have I interviewed? I just interviewed the BI and live ops guy from DreamHack, who has a sincerely amazing QA instinct, even though he's never done QA. And we talked about that a little bit. Who else have I interviewed? Sean Sharp, who's been in the industry forever, has always been an advocate for QA since like the late 90s. So it's like,
thanks, Sean.
everyone who's worth their salt at least recognizes where QA can have its benefit and has always been an advocate for them. So I think that's really cool, and it's just like, I'm also living proof. So that's fun to see. As far as what else you're doing these days, like you mentioned doing Twitch as kind of a side hobby, what was that like for you while you were balancing your game job as well?
So I started streaming on Twitch while I was at Motiga, so I think sometime in 2015. And it was something I had always wanted to try doing, just because I like playing games and yelling about them. And I remember there was one moment it was like a month before I started streaming. I had just like gotten back into World of Warcraft, because everybody does at some point, and I was playing a new character. I think I was playing like a Shadow Priest or something. I was leveling her up, and there was this amazing thing where I aggroed like 1 billion bad guys, and I had like a sliver of health left, and I managed to like acrobat my way out of dying and killing all of them, and I got a whole bunch of experience, and I was just like, I sat there in my living room, there was literally no one else around. I look around and I'm like, what? Someone else needed to see that happen. There's like no proof that I did this really fun, like cool thing in World of Warcraft. And it wasn't like a big raid or anything, but it was a really cool moment that I felt like I wanted to share with someone. So I started streaming shortly after that, and it became a really big part of my my spare time. I would go to work, I'd work on my stuff, and then I would, my goal for the first 6 months of streaming was to stream every single day, even if it was for 30 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 seconds. And I managed to do that for the first like 6 to 8 months. Every single day I would stream, and some of those streams were 30 minutes. Or one of them was I worked super late and hung out with some friends or something. I got home at 1 a.m. and I streamed Minecraft for like 45 minutes. And then I was like, I did it, guys. I'm going to sleep. And so I was just having fun doing that. I didn't really tell very many friends about it, because I just wanted to try it out. And I started getting a few people hanging out in the stream, and it ended up being a really interesting experience, because I started as someone who was incredibly nervous about it when I started streaming. And when you think about it, when you first start streaming, literally no one is going to watch you stream. Like, nobody is going to watch your stream at all. And so I was sitting there with like this red face, and I was really nervous with my audio. I
didn't talking and really mumbling.
Yeah, and I didn't have a webcam at the time either. And so I was like, I was doing like the jankiest setup. I had to use because I only had one monitor, I had to use my laptop to view chat if anybody was chatting. And then I would just have my main monitor as my game. And so it was this hugely janky setup. I had a like 7-year-old microphone that was all scratchy and breaking. I sounded like a robot. But I definitely, I had an increase in viewers over those first couple of months, and I eventually got another monitor and I upgraded my stream. But I started to realize like how easy it was to just do it. And that's kind of like the mindset we were talking about before you started recording, where like what was my excuse for not streaming before that point? I had 1 billion excuses. I could have said, I don't have a way to view chat. I don't have a way to I don't have a webcam. I don't have a really great audio device. My computer isn't the most performance like heavy computer. So why like maybe I shouldn't stream. Maybe I shouldn't do it. And I think I had that mindset for a long time. And then when I decided to do it, I was like, well, I got some viewers and had a lot of fun and had some positive conversations. I didn't get trolled enough, like a whole bunch.
Yep.
And nobody was super mean. It wasn't as scary as I thought it was. Why are not more people streaming? And then I got to a point where I was like, well, I want to talk to more streamers about what they're doing. I want to level up my stream. I want to be a better broadcaster. And so what I ended up doing was looking at meetup.com to see, I was like, obviously in Seattle, there's obviously going to be a meetup group for streamers.
Right.
And there wasn't. And so, there was.
Serious?
Yeah, there wasn't.
Wow.
In 2015, whatever month, August or something of 2015. And I was like, okay. And so I made one. And I'm like, I'm just going to start a whole meetup thing, and maybe there will be a couple of people around, and we'll just get to talk about broadcasting and level up each other's streams. So that has actually grown from 2015 until now into my very own organization, which is SOBA, the Seattle Online Broadcasters Association. And we have 4 organizers. It's me, James Fiore, who is a sort of stream producer for his wife, who's a partner streamer on Twitch. He's super awesome. He has a lot of leadership experience. We have John Higdon, who's like our social media director, and we have Kenley Chung, who does some work with Twitch at Amazon. So he actually directly works on that product, and he just helps us organize our stream, and he does a lot of video production stuff for us. So we're actually a team of 4 people in our spare time trying to build up this organization, and we have a monthly meetup that's sponsored by Twitch. We have over 100 people that show up every month.
That's amazing.
And now we're starting to branch out into other types of events. Like actually tonight in Seattle, they're hosting a discussion forum where there's going to be a theme, which is about like broadcasting and mental health, and then each person that attends the forum is going to write down a different subtopic, and everybody gets to vote on which topic they want to discuss, and it's going to be a more structured, a little bit more serious meetup as opposed to our really big social, like fun, come have drinks and eat food meetup. So, and then Kenley is also going to be organizing some educational things where you actually come to a lecture or a workshop and you level up your skills in a certain area that contributes to broadcasting. So we're trying to basically develop the Seattle area broadcasting people and help them collaborate, get better, and educate. And that's been my dream the whole time since 2015, is to start having these educational workshops and to have these discussion forums. So this little ragtag group that we have going in our spare time is everybody's really dedicated, and it's been an incredible experience watching that grow from 20 people in a brewery attic in like Fremont to a whole organization. We have sponsors, we have like Twitch involved, and we're now platform agnostic, where it used to be just a Twitch meetup. We now we're trying to make it really clear that we want to educate, help, and collaborate with anyone on any streaming platform.
That's awesome.
Or any broadcasting platform. So Mixer and YouTube people are starting to come to stuff, and we're hoping to be a more inclusive organization in that regard.
Okay.
So that's sort of my side job thing that I have
absolutely.
going on as well.
Well, I guess I know where I need to be next month.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's a podcast, and it's broadcasting.
There you
at
go.
some level.
You remember already.
There you go.
And I think I'll be flying in for the April meetup.
Okay, great.
So if you go, I can see you there, and we can meet up again after not waiting 5 years.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so, I mean, and a lot of what you're saying with starting up your stream is a lot of what I found with this podcast, or like starting my own stream, or just a lot of the stuff that Gary Vaynerchuk has spoken to, who I mentioned before, is just that, or a lot of other streamers have said, if you have to do it consistently to get better at it, and you have to just keep doing it, and whatever the quality is, it doesn't matter. What I've learned with this podcast is I interact with the Anchor app, and that helps me put it up, and it'll distribute it to Google Play and the Apple podcast apps for me, and it'll do that, and I handle some of the social media through that as well. But every time I record a podcast, it's been different. So this one I'm recording through Voice Recorder, the default app on my phone.
Yeah.
I have done video recordings, so then I have a video file that I have to convert to an audio file that this thing can read. Then I can't upload a file via the app, so I have to go to the desktop to upload a file there. Mm-hmm. Then I had to learn all the different ways I could transfer a file from my phone to the PC to then update it.
You have all these skills now.
Exactly. Yeah. I've done this. I think this is the 6th one.
Yeah.
And I've learned a different way of doing it every single time, basically.
Wow.
And so now it's like, okay, now I understand when it's a good time to do a video recording. My hour-long walk with Sean Sharp, when I'm holding my selfie stick out, and my hand is just like rock hard, like I've been rock climbing.
Yeah.
When I'm done, and I'm prying the stick out of my hand, and my wrist is killing me for the next 2 days. I'm like, okay, video podcast, either on a table with a tripod, or I take breaks.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to work.
Right.
And someone's going to have to understand that. But like every time I've done something, it's gotten a little bit better or a little bit smoother, or I'm a little more confident in just how I'm talking, doing interview questions, like, and these interview questions, or like when I'm interrupting you or poking something else that I came up with, I use that skill every time I'm in an interview or I'm interviewing someone else. And so everything I've done, I've found a practical application to my 9-to-5 stuff.
Yeah.
And the same thing is going to go for Twitch streaming. It's going to go for whether you're writing a book. It's going to go through any skill. My wife is now doing baking at home. She has a home bakery, and she's making these phenomenal cakes. You go back 2 years ago and look at a cake that she's making. It's a cake that you would expect from someone who's just doing it for fun.
Yeah.
But after 2 years of developing that skill, she's doing phenomenal cakes, and people are willing to pay quite a bit for the cakes.
That's awesome.
So, she is a baker, a stay-at-home mom who does baking on the side just because that's what makes her happy.
Yeah.
And now she's finding an angle to contribute differently because she likes that avenue as well. And so if there's any skill that anyone is worried about doing or thinking that they're not good at it, you're not going to be good at it if you don't do it. If you're not, and it's okay to
fail a lot.
Yes,
and that's okay.
And that's been a theme I've had on several podcasts: is fail because you're going to learn the most from it. Fail fast so that you can learn faster.
Yeah.
Don't hold yourself back because you're afraid of failing.
Yeah.
And
that's something I have to fight against literally every day.
Yeah.
Like I've had this discussion with people before. I spoke at my university a couple years ago. They have an emerging media conference there every year, and I was the keynote speaker. And my whole theme for that talk was failure. And it's something that I make a joke that I talk about failure so much because everybody needs to be failing more often and understand that it's better. But the joke is that like I talk about it because I need to tell myself that all the time. It's really easy for me to sit on this podcast with you and say like, oh yeah, Joe, we should fail all the time. Let's fail all the time. And then I'm going to leave this podcast. I'm going to go back to work on Monday, and then I'm going to be like,
I don't want to tell
oh
my
my
boss
God, I don't want to fail. Like I'm going to be freaking out and have all these blockers and like just self-made blockers for not wanting to fail. And like it's so easy to not do something, right? And doing something instead is a lot harder. And even after going through the last year with all this weird legal stuff and learning a lot with Don and like us growing as a partnership and like going through all of that has made it just this much easier to fail and be okay with it. But I still am not okay with it, and it's hard every single time.
And
it's super difficult.
I mean, your broadcasting association that started before the legal stuff, or kind of
well before, yeah.
But I mean, still, that was doing something new, and like, okay, let's see how this goes, and then the legal stuff piles on top of it. But you're doing the legal stuff, you're learning all that stuff, and that stuff sucks. I know what that's like. Right. But then you're also still doing this other thing new on the side. How did you keep yourself sane when you have all these kind of new avenues that you're going at, but then you still have all the stuff that you have to do? Yeah.
Are you actually asking me?
Yeah, I'm actually asking you.
So what's interesting is you bringing up like legal stuff coinciding with like hobbies and everything is that in order for me to get through a lot of what happened in 2017 and in order for Don to do it, we basically had to drop some stuff. Like I stopped streaming 100%. And that's something that I have felt bad about, but then I have also felt a weight lifted off of my shoulders, because if I had to stream every day that I was going through that legal stuff, I don't know that Don and I would have made it through all of that as effectively as possible, because we had to just refocus everything on making it through that day. And that day might involve a bunch of legal stuff. It might involve Don getting a new film project to work on. It might involve something completely different than all of those things. But we both kind of refocused in 2017 to like kind of helping each other get through that year. And that was our hobbies and our work, and everything was just kind of getting through every single day. And that meant not doing some things. And I had to be okay, and I'm okay now with not streaming as often and then not streaming at all for a while. And I still haven't fully picked up streaming again. And I'm still working on SOBA and building this community and this organization, and I have a lot of knowledge around streaming and the skills that it takes to do it, but it's something that I haven't been able to do as a hobby in a long time because I had to refocus what I was doing.
You had to choose what you gave a fuck about.
Yeah, exactly. I had to choose what to fail at that point, and I couldn't fail at literally everything. I didn't have enough time, so I had to choose what I was going to be like consistently failing at, right? And it couldn't be streaming at that point.
And I mean, even if it wasn't hard times, and you wanted to do streaming, but you didn't want to, like, if you wanted to do streaming, but you didn't want to have too much on your plate, you had to choose what you were going to drop.
Totally.
And when you're in those hard situations and you have to balance out what you absolutely have to do with the things that you don't want to do, but also you have to do, you'll find real value. You'll find yourself evaluating everything and just being like, this thing has got to go.
Yeah.
And finding the energy to come back to something, it's still hard because you've already determined the value for it and where it is, and now you have to go through a different process of changing your thinking about the value of it all over again.
Yeah.
And guess what? When you do it and you decide to pick something up again, you're going to kind of backtrack a little bit, and you're going to fail at it again.
You get to relearn some things, and you actually, because what's great is that I know when or if I pick up streaming regularly again, I know that I'll feel like, okay, I'm kind of starting over, but I'm starting over with a leg up on Lindsay, who started like way back in 2015, right? So I'll be starting from a more experienced and more skilled standpoint, and I'll get to relearn some things, but approach things from a different angle and learn new things, even though I might be doing technically the same thing over again. So really, like, it's all about skill building, right? Like, I think we have this really easy common perception that, like, I was talking about this after my GDC talk yesterday with a lot of students and new people in the industry who have a lot of questions about how to break in. And it's this perception is that there's sort of like a red light, green light scenario. You're either talented and you're doing something and you have a green light and you're successful at it, or you're not. And that's not a reality at all. That's not even remotely an objective reality. The reality is that the person who you think is in a green light scenario, who has a job at a company you love, who's doing the thing you want to do, who's really good at podcasts, or who's really good at running, or really good at a hobby that you want to be good at, that person didn't just randomly start doing that. Like, your wife is a really great example of like she liked making cakes 2 years ago, and they look like hobby cakes or cakes that you might just bake at home, and like, I bet someone would look at her cakes now and say, how do I do what you do? You're so talented. And it's like, no, she's skilled. She built a skill over 2 years. She worked really hard. And that's something we should be acknowledging. And I think a lot of people look at someone who's at a game company they want to work at, or whatever thing that they want to be skilled at or good at, and they think that person just did it. And they didn't. I've spent 5 years in the game industry figuring out that I love QA and I want to stay in QA because I jumped in. I accidentally jumped into the industry so early, like a month out of college. I was like, okay, Lindsay, you graduated college. You're going to spend your lifetime trying to get into this ridiculous industry that you're never going to get into. And then a month later, I got a job, and I was like, well, now what do I do? Like I know I can grow up my skills in QA. Do I want to be a tech artist? Like, because I was exploring that, and I've spent the last 5 years figuring out what I want to do in the industry. And even now, like, I'm like, a QA training lead is something that to me right now seems ideal. I love this job. This would be a dream job scenario for me right now. But I don't know how I'll be feeling in a year or a couple of years. And I know I want to be a leader at some point. So, like, will I be able to grow my own team? That's still a question. But I spent 5 years figuring out that I'm like, okay, I think QA is where I need to be, just in a leadership scenario, and understanding what my needs are and what helps me grow and learn more quickly and be successful. And that's taken forever. That's not, there were some people talking to me at this breaking into the industry talk that I did yesterday, and with a panel of awesome people at GDC, and other conference associates, actually. So I did the conference associate program for a long time. All of us either were currently or had been CAs in the past. So, and the conference associate program is where you can meet a lot of people who are trying to break into the industry. So we had a lot of different experiences. So we wanted to share, like, hey guys, we went through a lot of weird shit. Like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about breaking in. And these graduates, like these young graduates and people who are about to graduate, were coming up to me after the talk and asking me questions that I asked people when I was starting in the industry. And I had this really weird moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm that person at the table, and I was staring at that person at the table 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, or 7 years ago, thinking like, I don't know how to ask this person the yes or like what's the binary solution to me getting into the industry?
Yeah.
Like, what do I have to do? And I remember like asking this similar questions to what these graduates were asking me yesterday. And a lot of what I was telling people over and over again was like, you need to understand that this is not a red light, green light scenario. You are going to work really hard. You're going to have to build skills over time. And there's not a magic solution that I can give you, but I can tell you a whole bunch of weird shit that I did, and now I'm in the game industry, and that may work for you, and it may not. You need to find your own path. And that's what I'm trying to like send out to people is like there are two major components. Is like you need to be okay with failure, or you need to not be okay with failure, but acknowledge that you're going to do it, and think about what you learn when you fail.
Yep.
If you like, because I really shouldn't say like you need to be okay with failure, because I'm not okay with it. I hate it. It's the worst feeling. But what I try to do every time is like, if I failed someone, I need to ask that person how I failed them, what they wanted from me, and how I could have done it differently, and I need to internalize that and actually take action on it. And that is how you can be okay with failure, quote unquote. And then the other thing is like breaking down this perception of talent versus skill, right? Where like a lot of people have raw talent in a whole bunch of different things, but no one is really truly at a hugely successful point. Like if you're looking at someone standing on a GDC podium showing you their super awesome artwork for Far Cry 5 or whatever, you're like, how did they just do that? And it's like they probably spent 10 years learning how to do that, or they started drawing when they were 5 and they just kept drawing for a really long time and they didn't stop. And that's not something we acknowledge often enough.
Yeah, and talent only goes so far.
Yeah.
And it's through sheer determination and dedication that you start moving beyond talent and into skill and refining that craft. And I love your red light, green light analogy, because it's not always red.
Yeah.
That red light turns green over time.
Yeah.
And I mean,
we're constantly in the yellow. I'm pretty sure. We're all like kind of green, maybe
just
sometimes.
Just gas it and go.
Like, we're definitely sitting in yellow. Like.
And I mean, a lot of people change. Like you started in QA, you moved or at ArenaNet, you moved and you did this, you tried this, you figured that you didn't want to do engineering or art. And so you're constantly going back and forth. And so, yeah, maybe you had a green light into QA, but then you had the red light into production. And maybe over that time that could have changed, but you chose differently.
Right.
And you got a different green light. So don't be okay with finding out that, oh, I invested a whole bunch of time in something and I learned that I didn't want it. Or just over time, it's just like, I don't want this anymore. You can change your own light, basically.
Yeah.
So
you have a lot more control than you think you do.
Yeah.
You don't have big picture control, but like in terms, like when you, from the moment you wake up in the morning, you are choosing what you're doing that day.
Yep.
And sometimes you might feel pressure to do specific things. Like you might have a specific family scenario or a job, and I can't tell people to ignore that stuff, but you need to acknowledge that you are making choices every day.
Yes.
And you can make a choice to make time for something else or build a skill, and you can get to a green light scenario, but it's not binary.
Yeah.
You go from yellow to green. It's a scale.
One of my most favorite quotes I've heard from a song recently was that we've got the same 24 hours. LeBron James has the same 24 hours as you and I.
Right.
But because he spent like his entire childhood outside shooting free throws and shooting the basketball, he's where he's at.
Right.
But every day, the same person is out there who's at the same skill level as you. Are you making the same choices to go beyond how they're spending their time?
Right.
And so that's been a cool mental
awesome.
check for
I'm
me.
gonna steal that.
Yeah, the same 24 hours. So whenever I'm feeling like, I don't want to do this, but it's not something I'm building towards, it's like, well, shit, if I'm not doing this, someone else is.
Yeah.
And so that's been a cool head check for me over the last few months. Great, go ahead. I love it. It's not mine. It's from a song.
That's
okay. So I mean, let's just go ahead and wrap up. We've actually been talking for an hour already.
Awesome.
So why don't we just let you sign off and let you tell anyone who listens where they can reach out to you, talk to you, follow you.
Yeah. So I am on Twitter. I'm Pepper Plays, which is PEHPPERPLAYS, and that's my main Twitter account. I tweet about random stuff. I actually have been like kind of separating from social media a bit recently. My first couple of posts in the last like 6 to 8 months were about GDC, like just yesterday, and they were just about my talk. It was like selfish plug for my talk, and then like, oh my god, look at all the people at my talk, and so those were the two like Facebook posts I made recently. But for Twitter, I've just kind of been retweeting. But people message me on Twitter, and I'll respond to Facebook Messenger posts or Twitter posts. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can just search for Lindsay Peck, and I'll show up there. All my stuff's on there. You'll know it's me.
Lindsay,
yeah.
S-A-Y.
Oh yeah, Lindsay.
There we go.
Peck is my name. And so you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook. You feel free to add me anywhere and message me there as well. You can also email me at lapeck@gmail.com if you want to get in touch that way. But yeah, I'll respond to people. I got some emails from the talk yesterday about people trying to break into the industry. I really like talking about what the game industry is, what it's really like to work in the game industry, and I love to evangelize QA. So if you're curious about QA at all, or learning about what it's like to work in QA, or what I think the future of QA is, or what we need to be doing to make QA a better career option, I love talking about all of that stuff.
Great.
I also love talking about literally anything else. So we can talk about food or whatever, but yeah, that's where you can reach me.
Great. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk, and hopefully we'll see each other next month.
I know. Not in 5 years.
Not in 5 years.
Thanks, Jeff.
I'll make that promise.
Excellent.
Not in 5 years.
Perfect.